When trust is sold, how I got back my lost memories. I never thought I'd be here, sharing something so personal. But I need to get this off my chest because what happened to me, what my parents did, has completely shattered my understanding of family. It all started when I got back from a 2-week work trip. I'd been gone for what felt like forever, and I was looking forward to the usual homecoming. My mom greeted me with her signature lasagna, like nothing had changed. Dad asked about my trip and everything seemed normal. But there was something off. Something in the air felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I headed upstairs to my old room, the one I've been living in while I save up for a house. As I opened the door, I felt it. The emptiness. The room that used to be filled with memories, with everything I cared about. My old trophies, my collectibles, my gaming setup, looked almost barren. At first, I thought maybe my mom had just cleaned up. She does that sometimes, moves things around when she's tidying up. But then I noticed the shelves. Empty. My heart sank as the reality hit me. My entire gaming collection was gone. I'd spent years collecting rare consoles, limited edition games. Some of those items I'd hunted down for months, some even gifted to me by family. Couldn't believe it. I checked my closet, under my bed, the basement, nothing. It was like everything had disappeared. Panic started to creep in. Those games, those consoles, they weren't just things. They were memories. They were irreplaceable. I ran downstairs, trying to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't. Mom, Dad, where's everything from my room? The games, the consoles. They're all gone. My father barely looked up from the couch. We sold it, he said, like it was no big deal. That junk? You haven't touched it in years. We needed the money. His words hit me like a slap in the face. What do you mean, you sold it? I demanded. Some of that stuff was worth thousands of dollars. Those weren't just old games. They were. It's just junk, Alex. My dad cut me off, waving his hand dismissively. No one cares about that stuff. We got a few $100 for it. Be thankful we're letting you live here rent-free at your age. My blood was boiling. A few $100? I asked, my voice rising. That's not just junk. Some of that stuff. Some of it was irreplaceable. He shrugged. You never used it. We needed the cash. His indifference cut deeper than I ever expected. Like everything I had worked for, every collection I had built, meant nothing to him. I tried to reason with him, but nothing I said mattered. He just kept dismissing me, as if I was overreacting. But it wasn't just the money. It was the complete disregard for everything I'd cared about. I couldn't believe what they'd done behind my back. That night, I sat in the living room, still in shock. How could they do this? Why would they sell something I had poured my heart and soul into? And more importantly, what else had they taken from me? The more I searched, the more my stomach twisted. It wasn't just my gaming collection that was gone. As I moved through the room, the emptiness started to gnaw at me. I felt it in my chest as I scanned the walls and shelves. My grandfather's coin collection, my vintage baseball cards, even the academic awards I'd earned in high school. They were all gone. I kept telling myself it couldn't be true. Maybe I had just missed them, or maybe I was losing it after the shock of my parents selling my games. But deep down, I knew. I knew my parents had crossed a line. I called my girlfriend over the next day. I needed her help. We'd been together for a while, and she had spent enough time in my room to remember exactly how it used to look. As we made a list of the missing items, I couldn't help but feel the weight of betrayal pressing harder and harder. But the worst was yet to come. While we were documenting everything, my girlfriend was scrolling through the marketplace on her phone. I didn't think much of it at first, until she stopped scrolling, her face pale. Alex, she said quietly, turning the phone toward me. This can't be right. It was my stuff, my gaming consoles, my grandfather's coins, all of it listed on a local marketplace. My stomach dropped as I looked at the photos. They were taken in our garage. The timestamps confirmed it. My parents had posted the listings only a day after I left for my work trip. They had sold my memories, my treasures, while I was gone, and they hadn't even had the decency to tell me. I felt sick. I confronted my parents once again, but their response only dug the knife deeper. "You're overreacting, Alex," my mom said, barely looking up from her phone. "You never use any of that stuff. We needed the cash." "Cash?" I snapped. "This wasn't just junk, Mom. This was my childhood. That coin collection was from Grandpa. You sold something I'll never get back." "Well, we didn't think you'd care," Dad added, his voice flat. "We had unexpected expenses. We're just trying to make ends meet." Expenses. The word hit me like a hammer, and I could feel the weight of their secret pressing down on me. What were they really hiding? They had sold my things not for a few bucks, but to cover something they hadn't been honest about. I could feel the walls closing in. And then there was something else. The way they had acted when I pressed them for details. The defensiveness. The quick changes in subject. There was more going on here, and I needed to know what it was. Before I dive deeper into what happened next, I want to hear from you, my incredible viewers. Have you ever had something you truly valued taken from you without any explanation? Drop your story in the comments below. And if you're still with me on this journey, hit that like button, because trust me, this is only the beginning. I couldn't just let it go. The pieces weren't adding up, and every answer I got only raised more questions. My parents weren't just being careless, they were hiding something. I had to know the truth. I started digging. At first, I couldn't believe what I was uncovering. It seemed so far out of the realm of possibility that I almost couldn't wrap my mind around it. But the evidence was there, staring back at me. My brother, who had been keeping an eye on the family finances, had noticed something off long before I did. Money was disappearing from their joint account, and the excuses were always the same: home repairs, medical bills, the usual stuff. But when my brother started asking questions, he was brushed off with vague answers and promises that things would get better. I took a closer look at the bank statements. That's when it hit me: attempted transfers from my own account to theirs. I couldn't understand why my parents would need access to my savings. But when I cross-referenced the dates with the marketplace listings, it became clear. They hadn't just sold my stuff, they'd been using it as a quick fix for their mounting debt. I felt like the world was spinning as I pieced it together. My dad had been sneaking off on these business trips to the city. He told me he was taking care of work, but now I realized it was something much darker. And my mom, she was in on it too. She had been covering for him, pretending everything was normal. They had been gambling away what little they had left, trying to win it all back with one big bet. I couldn't stop the shock that flooded my chest. My parents, my own parents, had fallen into a destructive addiction. It wasn't just a few losses at the casino here and there. No, this was an obsession that had drained them financially. They had been feeding this addiction with my possessions, with things that weren't just old junk, but pieces of my life. I confronted them that evening, the weight of everything pressing down on me like 1,000 pounds. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. "Why sell my things? Why use my money?" My father's face twisted with desperation, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the truth in his eyes. "We thought if we could just get one more big win, it would all be okay. One more bet and we'd get everything back." His words hit me like a punch. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about what they sold. It was about an addiction that had consumed them, making them believe that everything could be fixed with just one more gamble, one more risky bet. My mother, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We didn't want you to know," she said, her eyes filled with shame. "We thought we could fix it before you found out." The silence that followed was suffocating. I realized then that this wasn't something they could just snap out of. This wasn't just poor decision-making, it was an illness. An addiction that had slowly taken over their lives, one bet at a time. As I stood there, trying to make sense of the chaos that had unfolded, I understood that this wasn't just about what they had taken from me. It was about their inability to stop, no matter the cost. And now, I was left trying to pick up the pieces of my life and theirs. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. And the worst part? I had no idea where it was going to lead. Before I continue, I want to ask, have any of you ever faced something like this? A secret addiction that turned your world upside down? If you're still with me on this journey, drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to hit that like button if you can relate, because things are about to get even more intense. Stay with me. As the days passed, the weight of what was happening kept bearing down on me harder and harder. My anger was building, but so was my sense of helplessness. I couldn't just stand by and watch my parents spiral further into this nightmare. I had to act. I had to take a stand, not just for myself, but for my future and for the memories they'd taken from me. With my girlfriend's support and some advice from a family lawyer, I started documenting everything. Every missing item, every marketplace listing, and every strange financial transaction I found. I went through the bank statements again, piecing together the full extent of the damage. The truth was, my parents hadn't just sold my things, they had sold them for a fraction of their true worth just to get quick cash. The rare consoles, my prized collection of vintage games, and my grandfather's coins, all of it had been offloaded for pennies. It made me sick to think how little they valued what I'd spent years building. The breaking point came when I found out they had gone even further. I was going through some old paperwork when I discovered something I'd never expected to see. My grandfather's watch, the one I'd kept safe in a safety deposit box, was gone. I couldn't believe it. That watch wasn't just a family heirloom, it was the last gift from my grandfather before he passed away. The sheer violation of it, the fact that they had stolen it without a second thought, it hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't just the loss of money or possessions anymore. It was the violation of trust, the violation of family. Everything had been turned upside down. I felt betrayed in a way I never thought possible. I couldn't sit back any longer. I had to do something. I began the legal process, sending a formal demand letter to my parents. I had to make them understand that what they had done wasn't just a mistake, it was a crime. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but this was the only way to make them face the truth. But I also knew that to make things right, I had to confront them one final time. My brother, who had been watching this unravel with growing concern, agreed to come with me. Together, we sat down with our parents and I laid it all out. Everything I had discovered, everything they had done. It was time for them to face the reality of their actions. The conversation started out as I expected. My father tried to dismiss it all, acting like it was just a misunderstanding. But the more we pushed, the more desperate he became. I could see the fear in his eyes, and his hands were shaking. For the first time, I saw him for what he really was, a man desperate to cover up years of lies. "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "We just needed one last bet. If we could just get one more win." But this time, I wasn't backing down. The addiction had consumed him. I could hear it in his voice, in every word he said. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about the endless cycle of hope and despair that came with gambling. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I uncovered the final betrayal. I found out that my father had been forging my mother's signature to take out loans. Couldn't believe it. For years, he had been running up debt, using my mother's name, hiding it from her. It wasn't just a financial issue. It was a complete betrayal of the trust that held our family together. The reality of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. My father wasn't just gambling away money. He had been gambling away my mother's future, too. And he had been doing it in plain sight, hidden behind a facade of family loyalty. The guilt on my mother's face when she realized the full extent of what had been happening was unbearable. That was when I knew this wasn't just a financial battle. It was a fight for their lives. The addiction had taken everything from them, everything they'd once cared about, and now it was threatening to take away their family too. It was time to act. I wasn't just fighting to get back my possessions anymore. I was fighting for my parents to face the consequences of what they had done before it was too late. Before I go deeper into what happened next, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to confront a family member over something this devastating? Drop a comment below. I want to know how you handled it. And if you're still with me, hit that like button. This is far from over, and I promise you the next part is a game changer. The final confrontation was nothing like I had imagined. My father, still deep in denial, tried to convince me that everything could be fixed if they could just catch one more lucky break. He still believed in the illusion of that one big win, the one that would make everything okay. But I knew the truth. The reality was crushing, and it had been staring us all in the face for so long. My father's obsession with gambling had cost us everything. Our home, our savings, and our relationship. I wasn't going to let him keep lying. Not anymore. I had his records, the meticulous notes he'd kept on every bet, every loss. He'd tracked everything like it was some kind of plan, like each failure was just a step closer to success. But all it had done was destroy us. I knew I had to expose the full extent of the damage, so I gathered the evidence and sent it to our family members, to creditors, to anyone who needed to know. The fallout was immediate. People were shocked, betrayed, angry. But it wasn't about revenge. This wasn't some twisted form of payback. It was about helping my mother escape. She had been under his spell for so long, manipulated into believing that one more bet would fix everything. I worked with her to file for divorce, making sure she had all the proof she needed to start over. She deserved a fresh start, a chance to rebuild her life, free from the constant chaos my father had dragged her into. Watching her slowly regain her strength, seeing her take control of her future, was more fulfilling than anything I could have ever imagined. The next few weeks were a blur. As I started recovering my belongings piece by piece, I realized something important. The things I thought I had lost, those physical items, weren't the most important part of this journey. What mattered most was what I had gained. I had found strength in myself, a resolve to stand up for what was right, even when it meant confronting the painful truth. My parents' lives were now in turmoil. My father, exposed for the lies and the betrayal, was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But for me, the healing had begun. My mother was safe, free from the grip of addiction, and I was free from the weight of the secrets that had haunted our family for years. Looking back, I realized something that still feels hard to accept. Sometimes, the hardest part of love is letting go. Letting go of the illusion that you can fix someone who isn't ready to change. It's not easy, but I had to let go of the idea that my father could be saved. I couldn't fix him. I couldn't change him. And in the end, that was the most painful lesson of all. Now, as I move forward, I know this chapter of my life will always be a part of me. But I've learned that sometimes the only way to heal is to walk away from the things that break you, even if they're the people you once loved most.